Brothers and sisters, I come to you from a different place today. This is the Basilica where I'm based, the Basilica of San Clemente. It's attached to our Irish Dominican convent here at San Clemente. And so this basilica has been in the hands of the Irish Dominican fathers since the middle of the 17th century. And it's a pretty famous basilica, one of the most visited sites in all of Rome, because underneath this basilica where I'm standing are excavations which go down a few floors and passing many centuries. Below my feet, there's a 4th century basilica that was excavated by a famous Irish Dominican Father Joseph Maluli. And even below that, you go down to even a pagan cult that celebrated the Mithras rite, the Mithras cult. And even there, you can walk on 1st century pathways that the early Christians would have walked on and that the other people of Rome walked on. And so you get a tremendous sense of history here in this basilica. This basilica is just astounding, especially for the apse, which we call that area that we see there. And at the top, we have this famous mosaic of Christ on the cross and branches coming out of Christ, touching all sorts of life. And this is because the cross, and being today Friday, we remember the Holy Cross in a particular way, which we should every day of our life, but a special recollection today, that on the cross, Jesus did something cosmic. You see, when Jesus in his passion, he wasn't just being attacked by earthly men. He was being attacked by cosmic forces as well, that you could say that were inciting humans to anger. And there's a much wider picture of our spiritual life, which takes in the invisible world. And sometimes because we can't see it with our eyes, we ignore it or we don't think of it. I'm sure many of us don't go around being so much aware that, in fact, most of the earth is covered by another world, we could say, the ocean. And there's a whole world underneath that. There are mountains underneath it. There's, the infinite variety of fish and life. And some of us are particularly conscious of it, but many of us, we don't go around thinking of that part of earth that is existing, that is real. And it's kind of a metaphor to think of the spiritual world and what exists there, the weird and wonderful, powerful figures, spiritual beings that as Christians we proclaim part of our faith. It's an article of our faith because they're revealed. It's a revealed part of our faith by God. So it's not an option if you're a believer to believe in the devil or to believe in fallen angels or to believe in good angels. It's part of divine revelation. It may not be the central truths of our faith like the Trinity, like, the incarnation of Jesus on the cross, in the incarnation and the passion of Jesus, the resurrection, but it's still a truth of our faith. And so Jesus on the cross, he's conquering the evil power of sin, which deprives us of goodness in our acts, in our moral acts, but also in the material world, the things that happen. And the church will define sin and define evil in general as a deprivation of goodness. See, God created everything fundamentally good. And so how did evil come about? Well, first of all, it comes about by virtue in terms of the first sin, you could say. The first evil is a moral. It came from a will, from within the will, which is free. And this belongs to the realm of the angels. That many of them created perfect intellect. They knew God. They're outside of time. They knew God in his fullness. They knew naturally, though. They knew him naturally through the gifts that God gave to them. Their first act when they were created is a good act because God created them good. But because of free will, they can choose. And they can choose to be irrational. You see, the first fall of these angels is totally irrational, like all sin. Sin is always irrational. It makes no sense. St. Paul says, as he says, we choose the things we hate all the time, even though we know that it's going to make us unhappy, even though we know it's going to cause us suffering and pain and cause others pain and suffering. Yet there's this tendency to drag us into it, and that's sin. But the original sin, the sin of the angels, is because of pride, because pride is to master one's own excellence and hold on to what one has at the exclusion of others. And so the angels, interestingly enough, St. Thomas Aquinas would say that the angels, when they were created, they were created naturally, but they too were invited, just like us, to a different knowledge, a supernatural knowledge, the knowledge of God's intimate life, the way that God knows and loves himself in his own interior life. And when the angels then were invited into this knowledge, they had to pass through an obscurity of faith. In other words, they had to pass through a trial of faith too, just like us, because they had to move from the known, what they knew so well and mastered so well, their world, their natural world, but they're invited to something completely unknown. And many of them rebelled at that moment because they preferred to be in control. They preferred to be in control of their end and their mastery, as opposed to surrendering, realizing that if they had trusted God, they would have come to something much greater, which was to know God as God knows and loves himself. But to do that, they had to surrender their mastery, you could say, of their own selves, their own excellence. And this is where some of them rebelled and pride. And it's on the cross with this profound humility that Jesus is showing us the opposite, that he accepts the Father's will. He accepts this obscurity of the cross, and it will lead to the resurrection. This is a central truth for all of us. May the Lord bless you.